Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something, well, pretty fundamental to how teams work, or sometimes how they don't work.
Conflict.
Exactly, conflict. We've got this fascinating set of materials here, transcripts from an online English lesson, actually.
Yeah, which might sound a bit odd at first.
Right, you might be thinking, an English lesson, what's that got to do with my team's issues?
Mhm.
Well, look, we're not here for the grammar.
No, definitely not.
Our mission is really to pull out the practical, real-world strategies for handling those tricky workplace disagreements.
And this lesson, it provides a kind of unique window, doesn't it?
It does. We're using it as a springboard to understand the specific language,
Yeah,
the words and phrases that can, either smooth things over or maybe make them worse.
exactly. It captures a team dealing with a real problem. And by looking at the language they use and also the language that's suggested in the lesson,
Well,
we can find insights that apply to pretty much any team, whether English is their first language or not.
so for you, the listener, this means we're going beyond just vocabulary. We're aiming to identify actionable ways to handle conflict and figure out why some phrases just land better than others.
Getting right to the core strategies.
Okay, so let's set the scene. There's this team meeting happening, and apparently you can feel the tension. What's the actual issue causing the friction?
Well, the core problem is about workload, how roles and tasks are distributed.
Ah,
Some people on the team feel like they're doing way too much, really stretched thin, while they see others as, well, not quite pulling their weight.
right, that old chestnut. It's a dynamic that can definitely breed resentment, impact productivity.
Oh, absolutely. The classic teamwork trouble, isn't it?
So how does this tension, which is probably simmering under the surface, how does it actually come out in the meeting? What starts the process of addressing it?
Well, one team member, Nina, she takes the initiative. She uses a direct, but importantly, a non-confrontational approach. She just acknowledges there's some tension and says something like, they need to clear the air.
Clear the air. Okay, that's our first key phrase then.
Yep. And it's a good one because it signals, hey, let's talk about this unspoken stuff. After she says that, another member, Ethan, gives a bit more detail about the workload issue.
Clear the air. It's powerful, like you said, because it names the problem, the tension, without pointing fingers straight away. Sets the stage.
Precisely. It opens the door for communication.
So after Nina kind of opens that door, what happens next? How do they move from just acknowledging the tension towards, finding a solution?
Well, Nina doesn't let them just dwell on the problem. She pivots pretty quickly towards solutions. And then Olivia jumps in with a concrete suggestion.
Which is?
Reassigning tasks. Basically, shuffling things around to make the workload fairer.
Okay, a practical step.
And Olivia frames this idea specifically as a way to find a middle ground.
Middle ground. Another key term.
Definitely. This idea of a compromise, somewhere both sides can meet, it's absolutely central to resolving conflict effectively.
So Olivia puts this tangible solution out there, aiming for that middle ground. How's it received? The language used to react seems important here.
It really is. Nina's response is particularly telling. She calls Olivia's suggestion constructive.
Constructive.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the significance of that word choice?
Well, constructive immediately frames the suggestion positively. It highlights that it's helpful, it's meant to build something better, not just criticize.
Right, it validates Olivia's input, encourages more of that kind of thinking.
Exactly. And then Nina asks Ethan if he can list out the tasks they need to look at for this reassignment.
And Ethan's response?
He just says, sure thing.
Sure thing. Simple, informal.
Yeah, but it signals cooperation, willingness. It says, okay, I'm on board, let's do this.
Right.
It keeps the momentum going.
So constructive focuses on the positive intent, sure thing. Shows that collaborative spirit. These little phrases really do carry weight, don't they?
They absolutely do.
Now, at some point, the manager, Maria, she appears. What's her role, and what language does she bring into the mix?
Right. Maria comes in and checks on how things are going. Olivia gives her an update, explains they're trying to clear the air by looking at task reassignment.
And Maria's reaction?
Her response is really important for reinforcing the team's positive actions. She calls their proposed solution, the task reassignment, a solid fix.
Solid fix. What does that convey?
It conveys confidence, doesn't it? It suggests the solution is robust, likely to work. It reassures the team.
Yeah, it validates their effort,
Yeah.
And she also praises them.
Yes, she explicitly calls it great work, which, again, reinforces the positive behavior of tackling the conflict head on.
So let's look at those three phrases together. Sure thing, constructive, and solid fix. What's the overall lesson here about how these specific English phrases help in conflict resolution?
What's insightful is how these seemingly simple, almost everyday phrases work together to build positive momentum. Sure thing fosters that sense of we're in this together. Constructive keeps the focus on solutions and validates ideas. And solid fix provides that crucial management endorsement and confirms they're on the right track.
So it's about using language that encourages agreement, cooperation, and just moving forward rather than getting stuck.
Exactly. Language that builds bridges, not walls.
Okay, now the source material, this English lesson, it also suggested some interesting alternatives to common phrases, ways to potentially make communication even smoother. Let's start with "it's okay." What was the suggested alternative for that, especially when agreeing on a compromise?
The lesson suggests using "it's fair" instead of "it's okay."
It's fair. Why is that considered more effective?
Well, the difference is subtle but significant. Fair implies a balance, a sense of neutrality, like everyone's perspective has been considered, and the outcome is equitable.
Whereas okay can sometimes sound a bit reluctant.
Exactly. It can sound like someone's just settling or passively agreeing, which might leave some resentment simmering. Saying, that compromise seems fair, feels more like a genuine shared agreement.
That's a really good point. Fair emphasizes the equity. Okay, what about resolving an issue instead of the very common "we'll fix it"?
The alternative offered is, we'll smooth it out.
Smooth it out. I like the sound of that. What's the thinking there?
It suggests a gentler approach, less abrasive, maybe? Fix it can sound very direct, sometimes implying blame, like something is broken and needs an urgent, possibly forceful repair.
Right?
Smooth it out, on the other hand, implies working through the wrinkles collaboratively, aiming for harmony. Saying, don't worry, we'll smooth out the conflict by tomorrow, can sound more reassuring.
Yeah, it focuses more on the process, the collaborative journey to resolution, rather than just the end point of fixing something broken. Interesting. And the last one showing appreciation after a conflict is resolved, instead of just "good job."
The suggestion was, well played.
Well played.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit more informal, maybe?
It is, yeah. But it adds a layer of appreciation for the skill involved. Good job is fine, totally standard. But well played acknowledges the diplomacy, maybe even the strategy, that goes into successfully navigating a tricky disagreement.
Like acknowledging a deft move in a game.
Kind of, yeah. It fosters that sense of camaraderie, saying resolving that tricky issue with the client, well played, can feel a bit more special, more rewarding than just standard praise.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up a bit. We've looked at this team scenario, seen the conflict around workload. We saw how they started by trying to clear the air, aiming for that middle ground, through Olivia's constructive suggestion of reassigning tasks.
Which the manager then validated as a solid fix.
Right. And we noted how even simple phrases like Ethan's "sure thing" played a part in keeping things moving positively.
And then we looked at those nuanced alternatives using "it's fair" instead of "it's okay" for compromises.
We'll smooth it out instead of "we'll fix it" for resolutions.
And well played as a potentially more appreciative alternative to "good job."
Exactly. And what's really striking, I think, is how this English lesson, maybe unintentionally, gives us such practical, universal advice on handling conflict.
It really does. The core ideas, addressing issues openly, looking for solutions everyone can live with, using language that encourages collaboration. These are fundamental for any team, anywhere.
So for you listening, the takeaway from this deep dive isn't just about learning English phrases, obviously.
Yep.
It's about recognizing how the strategic use of language, the specific words you choose, can really shape how conflicts play out in your own team environment.
Understanding the value of aiming for that middle ground, using constructive language, these are skills that go way beyond just English communication. They're about effective human interaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought to leave you with.
Go for it.
Think about the last time you were involved in, or maybe just witnessed, a team disagreement. Were any of these kinds of phrases or strategies used, either consciously or maybe just instinctively? And consider this. What might have happened differently if the team had, say, more deliberately focused on finding what felt fair to everyone? Or if someone had consciously tried to smooth out the tensions rather than just trying to fix the problem?
It really makes you think about how much power our words carry in those moments, doesn't it?
Mm,
Could a different phrase have led to a completely different outcome, something to chew on?
Definitely something to think about.